Hello and welcome to this week's Alder Hour, your favourite way to end your workday. I'm Matt Alder, I'm the host of the Recruiting Future podcast, and this is the Alder Hour. Now, it's light outside. This is brilliant. I live in Scotland, spring and summer in Scotland, the darkness has passed, and the light is here and it stays light really late. So I'm really happy because it may be 8 o'clock at night over here, but it's like nice and bright and lovely outside. What a great way to start the show. So this show is part of the Purple Acorn Network. You can head over to purpleacornnetwork.com afterwards to find out about all the other shows that are on the network. Please follow the Purple Acorn company page on LinkedIn. And also, this episode will be available as a podcast, wherever you get your podcast, as are all of the shows on Purple Acorn. Now, if you're watching this live, and I hope that many of you are, and if not, why not? Why didn't you watch us live? Watch us live. It's great. Anything can happen, literally. If you are watching live, throw some things into the comments, and if we can, we'll read them out on screen and give you a shout out. We've got lots of great content coming up for you, so lots of things to comment on, lots of things to learn, lots of things to maybe disagree with us on. Either way, get in the comments and get involved. So let's bring everyone up onto the screen and get the show started. I say everyone, it's just you, Rhona. Hi, Rhona, how you doing?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm really good. I had this whole thing prepared about how this was the first time since we're live at Transform. We're all together, but unfortunately, Jocelyn can't make it with a kind of a bit of a last minute hitch. So it's you and me. But I think that's great. We'll do fine, won't we?
Yeah, never a dull moment. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, it's live, isn't it? As I said.
Yeah.
So how's your week been since the last show?
It's been great. It's been really hectic. I've been trying to cram a month's worth of work in 1 week in hopes of going on vacation. We'll see how that goes.
Nice. Where are you going?
I'm traveling.
You're just not doing any work. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. Not doing any work.
Best kind of vacation, isn't it? Tell us about your now numerous segments that are coming up later in the show. What do you have for us this week?
So the Situation Room is pretty cool this week. We're talking about a employee whose new boss is making them uncomfortable and how to address that. And on Trending or Ending, we're talking about wellness initiatives and just, do they really work?
I love the fact that you've got such strong views on this. You actually made a trailer video about what you were going to say. So hopefully people will have seen that and will have rushed to tune in so we can hear you talk about that later. Fantastic. Well, without further ado, let's start with Points and Pints. Okay, so if you've not watched the show before, if not, why have you not watched the show before? If you've not watched the show before, Points and Pints, we have a drink of our choice and we look at some of the headlines that we found in the news this week. So this week, my drink of choice is Asahi 0%. Now, I'd like to dedicate this to all that is good about global trade. So Japanese beer bought in the UK, probably brewed in the UK as well. Let's have a look. Brewed in Italy. Interesting. There we go. So Japanese beer brewed in Italy, drunk in the UK. 0%. That's the alcohol, not the tariff. Just to be very clear. So let's get it open and see what it tastes like. Hang on. I'm not really a fan of this kind of beer, but I do think the Japanese or the Italians, or whoever it was who made it, do a great job. So let's see. Alcohol free as ever, because I can't speak if I have too much beer, proper beer. Let's see if it tastes as good as real Asahi with alcohol. Nearly. That's actually very drinkable. I'm a fan of that. Rhona, what do you have for us? What are you drinking?
So I'm trying, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Hayo. It's a non-alcoholic. I just Googled mocktails and I have this full list of mocktails that I'm going through. This one is blackberry lemon. It has like organic things and like natural nootropics, and it's supposed to help
Oh,
with focus
wow.
in your brain and a kick. And they say the most picky wine lovers will like it. So I've been told I'm a picky wine lover. Let's see.
Well, try some and see. Complete with nootropics, like literally giving you more focus, almost the total opposite from alcohol. So interesting. Well, while you're pouring that, well, you've poured it, so let's give it a try. Tell us what you think.
It's actually really good. I wouldn't say wine, but it's really good.
Cool. We are the champions for alcohol-free beverage. Watch this program to learn all about alcohol-free beverage, but also HR and recruiting and AI and other stuff. And speaking about other stuff, this is a great article. So not necessarily a problem. Gen Z employees are streaming TV while working from home. So this whole article is based on a survey. And in the survey, it says that 84% of Gen Z are streaming TV while they're at home working. Lots of things to say on this. First and foremost, it was actually a survey of frequent streamers. So not really surprising that they are frequently streaming when they're supposed to be at work. So survey people, please do better. However, I think it throws up some interesting thoughts. There's a brilliant word in there, which I'm not sure I've heard before, but maybe I have. Productivity. So pretending to be productive. So people pretending to work while they're watching TV. There's a quote from our Return to the Office champion from last week, if you watched last week's show, JP Morgan CEO, Jamie Dimon, who is obviously disgusted and appalled that people are watching TV when they should be working. And this vindicates why companies should take people back to the office. So I've got a few things to say. First of all, productivity was not invented this year by people in Gen Z. Productivity has been a thing for a very long time. So just to say that. Also, this is a really interesting article because it's written in a way that's going to trigger every Gen X and every boomer all over the world that people are sitting and watching TV, generational issues, work from home issues, all that kind of stuff. I do not have any kind of issue with this whatsoever. I was sitting doing work last night watching TV and I was actually quite productive. Ultimately, as an employer, if you don't know what it is that your employees are supposed to be delivering and whether they're delivering it, then it's your fault. It's your fault. Does it really matter? People who have the type of job that they can do at home like this, does it matter how they do it? It's not necessarily about skiving off. It could be about concentrating. It could be about just the balance of the day. The greatest thing about flexibility and working from home, it might be that your brain works better in the evening and it's better to watch TV in the afternoon if you've got no meetings, whatever it is. I remember being a boss of a team a long time ago, before work from home was really a thing, and getting into lots of trouble because I let them all wear headphones so they could block the noise out in the office. And this was considered to be terrible because they had their heads down working really hard rather than talking to each other, which apparently was a bad thing, and it was their choice. So I really don't think this is an issue. I think, again, it kind of really highlights this problem that a lot of employers seem to have with actually understanding what their employees do all day or are supposed to do all day, and thinking that getting them back into the office and away from the TV is somehow going to solve this. Rhona, what do you think?
I loved the headline of this article. I agree with you. I think it's kind of like engagement rage bait type article because you're going to get people talking. It reminded me of a boss I had a few years ago. We were all working from home before it was cool. And he really likes many things about work from home. My job was resourcing, so it was a professional services company. You had to keep people busy in order to make money. Otherwise, you're just paying them and not getting money from them. His thing was, every meeting, Rhona, make sure I don't want to be paying people to be watching TV. And I was like, well, what's wrong with that though? By the way,
Mm,
my TV is like right here. So while I was having meetings with him, I was actually watching TV as I was sitting here. I think going back to working in person, did we not all work at offices where the TV was going with the news or with some sports thing? I didn't want to watch any of those. Or
mm,
the radio, someone like
mm.
the office manager or the receptionist decided what we all listen to on the radio. I mean, it's the same thing. I personally work with music. I use something called Brain FM because I like have issues
I love that. Great
focusing.
stuff. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Brain FM is on all day while I'm working. Also my TV shows and stuff like that. Sometimes you just need to hear people in the background. The productivity thing, I just cracked up because come on. I think I learned how to fake work from the older people, the older generations at work, because let's face it, who works on Fridays? Who works the day before a holiday? There's a bunch of people walking around the office acting as if they were working to the point where my Fridays, the way I say happy Friday to my teams, any team I've worked with is happy Friday. Hope you're not doing actual work and just pretending today.
I think there's two more things for me. I think excuse me, the point you made about the radio is perfect because certainly in the UK, maybe not so much anymore, but certainly, I remember when people had the radio on in the office when I was kind of first starting to work. The radio stations would do shout outs to people's offices. It's like, hey, everyone in
Yes.
the so and so department of so and so, give us a shout. So, not a new thing. Also, Gen Z, we're talking about the generation that invented dual screening or even triple screening. We're talking about people who can who actually concentrate better when they're looking at multiple screens. So, great article, but I think I think we're quite aligned on this one. If anyone disagrees, please write us in the comments and tell us why you don't think people should be watching TV at work. Even sounds quite ridiculous, but yeah, there we are. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. For companies to fully integrate AI, their HR leaders are going to require more training. So I am 1,000,000% in agreement with this article. It's quite a sensible article. It's not been done by. It's not a survey about TV streaming done to heavy TV streamers. It's like a really kind of sensible article. And what it's saying is actually that HR should really be in the driving seat when it comes to AI in the enterprise for a number of reasons. First of all, shaping that kind of mix between, what humans do, what machines do, planning for the future in terms of what does the workforce look like as AI pans out. A lot of the obviously AI and a lot of the HR systems and processes and anything to do with people, but also skills. Do people in the company have the right skills for AI? Are we acquiring the right skills? Are we reskilling people? Really kind of understanding that and being the voice of the human in all of this between the CEO and the IT department and the CFO. So absolutely vital. And I think what I've really learned in the last few weeks is we can tell people that they should be experimenting with AI, go and take a lunchtime and go and learn this system and do this and do that and reading newsletters and all that sort of stuff. And that's great. However, it's not enough because we don't know what we don't know. And this really came home to me because I went on a kind of a day's sort of AI training roundtable discussion with with a guy who's a software engineer who's actually building this stuff. And I knew that there were things that I didn't know, but actually there was a huge amount that I didn't know. And I was like, I would never have found that out unless I had, someone at the source actually telling me the implications and discussing it with my peers in terms of where we're taking, where this is taking us. And also I think if people are sort of trying to do their own research without that sort of support, there's so much kind of AI bro nonsense out there. People just talking, nonsense about what's possible now and all this sort of stuff. And also people who are alleging that they're experts in AI, but actually they're just faking it. And it becomes sort of fairly obvious when you kind of dig into it. So I just think it's really important. And I think that we can't expect people to educate themselves to this extent at this stage of the AI revolution. 6 months ago, 12 months ago, made perfect sense. Now we're talking about big strategic enterprise stuff. And I think that companies need to step up and get people the right intelligence, the right training, the right structures, and the right frameworks to deal with this. Rona, what do you think?
So it's interesting because I was having this conversation. I actually had it at Transform with a CHRO that's on my podcast. It's going to be released later this week. And she was saying, and I actually agree with her, HR shouldn't be leading the charge when it comes to AI. We know the people 100%. We can help with the change management and all of that. But this needs to be driven by the technical people, if you ask me. Like everything AI, just like you said, there's so many things that we don't know, and it's really not in our skill set to know these things. It's easier to ramp up leaders in IT to really lead the charge as far as how AI is used in the organization, and then HR to be a strong partner, not a afterthought partner like we're usually, but like a strong partner helping with the adoption of it for sure. And many IT teams have user adoption teams. I know because I've worked on them. No, this is time for HR to lead the adoption of this, but not lead the implementation of it. So, oh, kind of agree, kind of disagree with you.
Yeah, I'm kind of yeah, I'm 50-50 because I think that I think even, what you said, they still need training to do that. I think, people need that kind of context training and all that sort of stuff. I'm just a little bit I don't know whether everyone should sort of cede control to the it's cede control to IT, to technology, because I've just seen that in the past. It never ends well. So maybe from just that basis, I think perhaps HR should take a front seat. But I do agree with you. I think that this is something for the whole enterprise. Everyone needs to bring their skills and experience to the table. But I think we do need people to have training to just understand the scope of this and everything that's involved.
Interesting. I guess agree to disagree. I wonder what people think in the comments.
Yes, let us know. Let us know. I'm not sure we completely disagree, but but maybe we're on.
Kinda.
So it's kind of a bit of a situation. So let's move on to the situation room. Okay, well, here we are, back again. Brief, can't speak tonight, brief graphic break. So tell us about this Reddit article.
So here's the situation. This person has been at their organization for like 3 years. Their previous boss just got promoted to SVP. And now the new director, let's call them D, that's what they were calling them, stepped into the role in January. Like things started off okay. But lately, the person's been feeling more emotionally reactive and under pressure. They even had a performance meeting with both the SVP and D, and some of the feedback was fair, but one key situation was like misrepresented because D left out context. That always happens. So now here's where it gets tricky. D keeps referring to this person as neurodivergent in conversation, saying things like, "Oh, you and I are neurodivergent." And look, I get it, but this person doesn't identify with that term. Even though they deal with anxiety and depression, they've never called themselves neurodivergent and they don't like being labeled that way. And it's happened multiple times, and while they haven't said anything to D yet, they did bring it up to the SVP who agreed that it wasn't okay. But now they're like stuck in this cycle because, again, anxiety is affecting their performance, and then performance stress is making their anxiety worse. And they're like, they weren't even asking for advice. They were kind of putting it out there, but everyone's advice in the comments is pretty much what I say they should do is like, you need to talk to D and let them know because there's so many, like, D might not even know that this is a problem. I'm pretty sure they don't know. And until you talk to D, tell them this is a problem, and then they continue doing it, then that's where it really is an issue, I think. What do
Mm.
you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, like all of these Reddit things that we talk about, we're obviously missing a lot of context here. I think in the actual kind of the issue itself, that there's a bit in there that says, so her new boss is sort of saying, "Oh, we're all neurodivergent together," and all this sort of stuff. I mean, there could be a big power move there. It's kind of like, you're like me. It's almost like unseeing that person in some way. So I think that's part of it. I think that it's kind of a classic issue. If you have two neurodivergent people, one's too anxious to kind of speak up, and the other one perhaps doesn't appreciate or see or understand the effect of their words on it. So I think there's that angle as well. But ultimately, coming back from it, I think that the issues here are about how people treat people at work. And it's brilliant that there is much more acknowledgement of neurodiversity than there ever has been. I did an interview on the podcast with one of the economists from Indeed, which was published last week, and they done this research that says, the number of job postings that go across their platform that are mentioning the word neurodiverse or neurodivergent to try and sort of attract a broader spectrum of people to their business is kind of an all-time high, which is brilliant. So I'm all for that, but I think we just need to be really careful about labels, because the whole thing about being neurodiverse is people are not the same, and you can't really bucket people into this kind of, it's like any kind of sort of unrepresented group. You can't really bucket people into this particular thing and think you can understand the way that they think. So I think there's a big thing here about treating people as people. Neurodivergent people, their brains work very, very differently, but they've probably got a good understanding of how their brain works and what they need to thrive in a job. So I think that we've come a long way in terms of recognizing this term and trying to support people in the workplace. But I think there's still work to do to get away from this kind of labeling of people and trying to predict how they're gonna behave and what they need, rather than just having an open dialogue about it. So it's an interesting thing. I think it throws up some issues, and there's been progress, but there's still a long way to go. That's my summary of it.
Yeah, for sure. Labels are never good. And like you said, trying to boxing people. And when we were talking about this before the show, you brought up something that I hadn't even thought about. But it's like, if the boss is neurodivergent, maybe they're not even aware of what they're doing. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
because I mean, they're neurodivergent, right? And again, I'm not trying to box people in, but this is things that we know that it could be something that they deal with, and they are not self-aware of what's happening. And then now you have two people. And I think what struck me the most, because people kept telling them, like, well, talk to HR. Of course, there's no HR at this company
Yeah.
to help with this situation. But yeah, we've come a long way, but we definitely need to be careful about how we talk to people, and never assume that because you're comfortable with a label, someone else is comfortable with that label. Even if you see yourself in that other person, you can't label yourself or label them that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic point to finish on. So again, really interesting and really important to discuss. So let's move on to Rhona. I will undoubtedly see you again shortly, but have a little break, and we'll move on to our guest. Hi, Lydia. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, an absolute pleasure. Can you just introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
I am, in short, your BFF on all things HR and technology. I am the unsolicited source of advice, if you will, for anyone who's looking to make a technology purchase or just understand the latest and greatest in the HR tech market.
Fantastic. And I don't know if we've been listening we've been having lots of conversations about AI and HR and training and all this kind of stuff. And I'm interested to give us your perspective on what you might have heard so far. What's your thought around AI training and HR, and who's
Ooh,
that kind of stuff?
okay.
Give us
This might be a little bit controversial, I have to say, based on what I have heard.
We love controversy.
So I think my general take in terms of the age-old debate of should HR lead this? Should HR be a part of it? Should we get an HR involved, and how should we get HR involved? Is really coming down to this. Just because the IT team is not expecting HR to implement an intranet today, it doesn't mean that HR doesn't understand how an intranet works or what to expect of the intranet. Same thing comes to AI. I don't think an HR team will ever need to know how to code or use their own LLM in any way, shape, or form. However, they do need to have an answer when an IT person or anyone in the organization asks a question like, hey, what's the solution to X? You kind of need to know what the latest tech stack is on the market to come up with an informed answer to help the workforce and drive for the overall betterment of the organization.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I'm sadly old enough to remember when the internet first arrived, and there was kind of a blanket thing that I heard from a lot of HR people, which was, "I'm not technical. I'm not technical. I'm not technical," and it became a genuine excuse to an actual barrier, to being used as a kind of a barrier to actually kind of have conversations and things like that. So I think literacy of these things is incredibly important. You've written a really interesting article, which I read a couple of times actually, called "My Problem with Ethical AI." Just talk us through the article. So I think it's a really interesting. You raised some really interesting points in it.
So, I mean, this whole article came about after a year of sitting on the term and why I'm so uncomfortable with the term. The first time I came across the term ethical AI probably happened about early 2024, so a little over a year ago. And I was like, okay, on the premise, it makes sense. We should all behave ethically. There should not be any biases, especially not biases driven by a technical system, right? And
Hmm.
then the more I got into the world of AI and understanding how LLMs work, how training is done on language models, how we turn those large language models into tools that we use today, I had a moment of realization where I was like, hang on a second, are we asking the right question here? Because if we think about the first principle or first argument that AI is trained on human generated data through the past two millennia, if you will,
Hmm.
then effectively our argument towards ethical AI is our argument towards whether humans have been ethical. And I feel like we all have our own answers to that.
Yes.
If we
Yes.
take that data en masse and train it, that's fundamentally my challenge with ethical AI because we're blaming a piece of technology for something that we ourselves are part of the challenge.
Yeah, and I think what's always been interesting for me in the debate about this and the arguments about legislation and regulation and all those kind of things is AI is being held to a higher standard than humans are. It's like, where are these conversations about humans? Where's the legislation with teeth about humans doing this kind of stuff? So that was the thing that just kind of struck me again reading the article about actually that's kind of just a bit mad, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, listen, I've run HR tech departments. I'm not surprised by this, quite frankly, because when the first thing goes wrong in HR, when you have a complaint about, hey, my 401k matching is inaccurate or my benefits enrollment is inaccurate, what do we say? Oh, the technology screwed it up. It must be in the integrations. We never look on ourselves to say, is it the process design? Is it the individuals involved? It's always a technology. And I think we're just experiencing the same thing with AI as we have in the past with all other forms of technology. Except this time it's a lot messier because HR isn't getting into AI after the consumer market has figured it out, after the enterprise market has figured it out. We're diving into it with everyone else at the same time, and we're learning about it with everyone else at the same time.
And you talked about how actually we could use it to understand some of the biases that are out there and kind of reflect back to us some of the unethical behavior that happens, whether it's, done on purpose or subconsciously.
Absolutely. So the way I look at AI is that it's really just mirroring back to us our historical behaviors and our historical beliefs, if you will. The only challenge is that it's doing it at such a rapid pace that it's a little scary to us because when we used to make a biased decision, it was one mistake of a dozen of decisions that we make. Now it could be a ginormous one single mistake that makes headline news depending on what system or vendors you're affiliated with. I think the challenge I pose to everyone who is working in HR and thinking about biases and ethics in AI, it's really reframing the question. It's not about is the AI ethical? It's about the fact that what is AI reflecting back to you, and what is your problem with that reflection? I think that's really the hard question that a lot of us need to get back into.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a stunning point. I mean, it reminds me of that kind of that sort of original thing about computer programming, garbage in, garbage out. And this is the ultimate the
Yeah,
ultimate kind of
absolutely.
personification of that, like just crazy, absolutely crazy in terms of the things that it puts out. So what's the what's the kind of way forward with this? Because I know that there are a number of really interesting tools out there that are looking at AI for different types of bias and trying to kind of identify that and deal with it. What would your advice be to people in terms of, obviously understand what ethical means and why it's like it is, look at the way it's reflecting biases back. But what's the way forward from here? How can we use this situation to make, everything fairer and better?
Absolutely. I would say the simple answer to all of this, simple in quotation marks, is let's fix a broken system. But let's be honest, no CHRO is going to take this advice and roll it out tomorrow. So I think it's really about how do you take the short term and inviting it into the longer term reframing of a lot of the conversations, right? So take, for example, in the short term, all of the technology absolutely works. It's really about reviewing the technology to make sure there's no additional points of bias or there's no additional points of concerns or challenges in there. So definitely look at the technology. But in the medium term, it's really about looking into what is your data reflecting back? How are you piloting it? What is your pilot population indicating versus the normal the average population, if you will. So there's a lot more of trial and error involved in the system. And then the last bit of it, which is a super long-term goal for everyone, and I would highly encourage to not kick the can down the road, it's related to the idea that gradually, as you're looking at the system, as you're looking at those minor reflections, how do you make those incremental changes in the system? Because unless you make those changes, it's still garbage in, garbage out, and you're still training the AI on the broken data.
And I think one of the issues is as well is I know that lots of HR teams and people leaders are sort of taking a back seat on this because they're waiting for it to become ethical, or at the very least waiting for legislation to arrive so we can understand what's possible and what's not possible. And just there's always a mismatch between legislation and regulation and the speed of technology. There always kind of has been. However, it is now insane. I mean, I started doing a project on some AI tools about 3 weeks ago, and then I had to stop it, and I started it again. And they'd all just moved on since since then. And actually, I was like, "Wow, this is just absolutely the speed of change is absolutely crazy." So there's no way around, is there, on this one?
I honestly don't think so. I mean, for everyone who's said to me like, "Hey, I'm just waiting for the regulation to come out. I'm just waiting to see what the law says about this." I would encourage for those folks to look at the timeline between when GDPR rolled out versus when the first mass iteration of HR in the clouds came to be a thing.
Mm.
It's over a decade. So can we really afford the 10 plus years it takes for governments to regulate this? And on top of that, it's not just a government regulation that matters in this. You need to wait for court precedences to be set as well. And
Yeah.
that can take ages after a regulation is presented and made into a law, essentially. So I think a lot of this is trial and error. It is risky territory, and I completely get it. But it's also really cost benefit analysis when it comes down to it, in terms of what are the minimum levels of risk that you're willing to take on, and does the benefit of adopting technology outweigh those risks?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the famous example here is the Microsoft antitrust case, where they were taken to various sort of courts, European courts, about bundling Windows with their browser. And by the
Yeah.
time that had been sorted out, everyone was using Chrome anyway, or everyone was using Firefox, or it just kind of wasn't the ruling kind of wasn't relevant to the way that the world was at that point. And this is even more kind of crazy. Just coming back to that sort of training question. I mean, how do the HR people out there, how do they get up to speed with everything? How do they, what kind of trade, what would you advise to someone who is just feeling completely, I mean, everyone's feeling overwhelmed by this, but someone who just doesn't know where to start or what to do or who to believe? What can they do?
I mean, listen, I've been doing this for over 2 years in the HR AI space, particularly, and I've been in HR tech for over 15 years. And genuinely, I'm still having whiplash from everything that I'm absorbing. So if that's the case, I can only imagine what it's like for someone who's working 10, 12 hours a day in an HR capacity and then trying to figure out what's going on. So a couple different advice, right? I think number one, do what you can with the time that you have. Because at the end of the day, it's all about doing the best that you possibly can. I can tell you to go listen to the podcast, read newsletters, do lunch and learns all I want. But at the end of the day, if you have 5 minutes, you have 5 minutes. However, I will say though, for those of us who have learned to bike or learned to swim later on in life or even as a kid, you know that you didn't learn how to bike or how to swim by reading the theories about it. You didn't go to lunch and learn and say, this is a philosophy of how to ride a bike, and therefore you can now go ride a bike.
You
You
can't,
did
you
it by
can't learn,
practicing.
yeah, you can't learn to ride a bike in a seminar. That's the, the
Exactly.
famous quote.
You did it by practicing. You did it by failing. You did it by figuring out what works, what doesn't, what type of setup works best for you. And that may not be the setup that your neighborhood friend was using at the time. So it's all about trialing and erring and trying to figure out what works the most for you. I know there's a lot of suggestions of, oh, this is the best tool for HR professionals, or this is the best prompt that all HR professionals should use. I will give the same advice here as I do for anyone trying to pick out an outfit. Do whatever fits your groove, literally. Do
Yeah.
whatever fits your mood, whatever works for you, because at the end of the day, you're the only person that's using the technology, and it's your productivity that really matters and your comfort that really matters. So
Yeah, I
whether
think
it's GPT or something, just start using it and figuring it out.
absolutely. And final question for you. Impossible question, but I'm going to ask anyway. What does the future look like? What's this all going to look like in 2 or
Ooh,
3 years' time? I mean, I couldn't even predict what was going to happen in 3 weeks. So it's a bit of an unfair question, but give me a vision. What do you think your vision of what would you like the future to look like?
okay, I'm going to give you a pessimistic version and an optimistic version. How's that? So
Perfect.
the pessimistic version is the version that I'm genuinely concerned about and scared of, which is when I watch the combination of the macroeconomic environment in combination with AI capabilities and a lot of promises about the labor market. Realistically, we know that with AI, there could be a disruption for the labor market for the better, or there could be a disruption for the labor market for the worse. My pessimistic outlook is a disruption for the worst, where we over rely on a lot of technology automation in favor of human productivity, if you will. Now, that said, here's the hopeful part of me and the silver lining in all of this. I genuinely believe the potential for human creativity is undertapped and has been undertapped. If you think about the way that we've measured productivity efficiency over the last 2, 3 decades, it's really the bits that are the most easily automated, if you will. How many hours do you work? How many emails can you send out? How fast can you do this task? Whereas the true potential of being human is really in our creativity. And that's actually what makes me incredibly hopeful about what AI can bring, which is allowing us to lean more into that creative capacity and being able to direct and curate, if you will, what the future could look like.
I really hope that's what happens. I really hope that's what happens. And I'm kind of optimistic. Lydia,
I've got my fingers crossed.
absolutely, yeah. Lydia, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me here.
Excellent. Right, let's move on to trending or ending. Hi, Rhona. Back again.
Hi.
So we're not well. Tell us, employee wellness. Tell us everything.
We are not well. I mean, companies have invested so much in wellness for so many years. The question is, why aren't people well? And I think lots of HR teams are asking themselves this right now. From meditation apps to resilience workshops, companies really have spent the last decade piling on well being initiatives. And yet, burnout is still on the rise, engagement is shaky, and trusting leadership, I mean, we know where that is. So, this HBR article that really inspired this segment really got to the heart of it. It's saying like wellness programs are too often a band aid on a broken system. Instead of changing the actual work environment, companies are offering yoga mats and hoping that employees will downward dog their way out of stress. Like I said in the video that I released earlier today, you really can't namaste your way out of toxic workload expectations, performative flexibility, because we know what that's out there,
Mm,
and or managers that still think that visibility equals productivity. I mean,
yes.
that's the core of things. Like employees don't want more self-care suggestions. They want structural change, they want workload clarity, psychological safety, the ability to log off of work without guilt. And yeah, that starts with leadership because there's no wellness program out there that can fix a culture that burns people out by design. And I really think that's the core of what's happening. Most of our cultures at work, whether we want to admit it or not, they burn people out by design. So, is the traditional well being program trending or ending? I think the performative stuff is ending, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But a deeper structural approach to employee well-being, that better be trending or we're all in trouble. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I just think that some of the things you see sometimes that are badged as well-being that I just get, they're like PR stunts or they're to make someone in the senior management with a guilty conscience feel better or people I just, there's been some crazy stuff. And I think the pandemic was really the high point of all of this. I mean, I'll never forget being on Zoom and Teams, burning people out all the time, and companies were trying to help people by organizing yoga on Teams or quizzes on Teams or go for a walk on Teams. It's just like, oh, So I think that was that was the high point or the low point of this for me. I think that also, I think that one of the issues is that sometimes things kind of make the headlines that are totally ridiculous. But beneath the surface, I think there are a lot of well-being initiatives that are well received, that are going down really well, and I think a lot of that is to do with, first of all, making sure that you're not doing anything that's making your employees unwell. I think that's the biggest wellness initiative that people can kind of take. And I did a couple of interviews. I've done a few interviews on the Recruiting Future podcast about wellness, talking to people who kind of specialize in this kind of things. And some of the stats are quite interesting. So I was looking at one report which said that 90% of employers who are tracking the ROI from their wellbeing benefits and their wellbeing initiatives are actually seeing a return on investment in some way, shape, or other. But when you kind of dig down and look at what those kind of wellness initiatives are, they're kind of flexible. It's things like very flexible gym memberships where people might not be able to, necessarily afford to go to the gym or prioritize going to the gym, but they have to come with the corresponding behavior from the employer. So if you're giving your employees gym membership, then, the CEO needs to be seen to be leaving work early to go to the gym, just to kind of set that tone to say, we're giving this gym membership, but actually we want you to use it. And we want you to use it, and we understand that, how that needs to happen. So there's kind of three things in there, aren't there? It's like, don't do stuff that makes your employees unwell, and if you do, you need to fix that first. You want, wellness initiatives that actually resonate with people, that are useful, that people can actually use and get some kind of well-being out of it. And leaders need to set the example. They need to show that this is incredibly important. This is what we should be prioritizing. And I think if you look at it that way, it just makes perfect sense, because burnt out people don't perform very well. People who are ill don't perform very well. It just again, one of these things that just makes so much sense, that actually if you've got an engaged, healthy, focused, energized workforce, why is that a bad thing? Why is that a bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that should be top priority for leaders and for HR teams. But again, as like we both have said, as long as it's not a band-aid, you can't be like trying to like here's a shiny object, feel good, and then come back to work where it's designed to not feel good, or have the things, because there are lots of good wellness programs. But like you said, if people aren't using it, if you're not modeling, hey, I'm going to the gym type of thing as the leader of the company, then people are going to feel, because of what they've experienced, that they can't really take advantage of these things. So yeah, really good points. I agree with you on this one.
And what's the worst example of a wellness initiative that you've seen? I know you're trying to solicit some comments online, but what's the worst example, or the
Uh,
funniest example of
To me,
a run?
still, it's that the Amazon boots that Amazon, um, tried to implement. I think they're not around still, but it was back in 2021. I remember the internet went, oh my gosh, piled on them for this. But it was a time where the warehouse workers were complaining about how they weren't getting breaks, and wages weren't fair, and all of these, we know the complaints about the warehouse workers for Amazon. And what they did was create these booths where you could go in and use this app and have some wellness and some meditations or some videos. I don't remember the details. I actually linked it in my post earlier today. I think that was such a slap in the face for people, because it was literally a booth placed in the middle of the warehouse. So you're still at work, you're still there. It's like, go take these 5 minutes, lock yourself in this thing that looks like a coffin, and like listen to this thing, zen yourself out, and then get back to work. Like, it was so clear this wasn't about helping anyone.
Yeah.
And the internet let them know.
I think for me, it was finding out that a lot of, certainly, and I'm sure this is true all over the world, but certainly a lot of kind of London city law firms have sleep pods, so people can sleep if they're working all night, and it's kind of dressed up as a, we really look after you because we've got these sleep pods, so you can, when you're working all night in the office, you can actually get some sleep. And you just take a few steps back from that, you're like, it really is that but anyway, that was I still remember that conversation. I just found it staggering. Although, ironically, I was working for an ad agency where we did sometimes used to work all night and probably could have done with a sleep pod. So
It's funny
those
because,
swings and roundabouts.
I
Yeah,
come from tech, and there's many, an implementation or like a major release where we were at the office till 2, 3 in the morning, and lots of people would take their, sleeping bags and stuff like that. And I always made it a point, especially when I was in leadership, to never do that. I never wanted to model that. I always told the company, and I always had hotel rooms for my team close to the office.
yeah,
Go to a hotel, take a nap, shower, do whatever you want to do, not at the office, and come back, because
yeah.
we're like, we would take shifts and that would be planned. So
Mm,
yeah, I'm totally anti sleep pods at the office. It's like, this is not where I sleep. I've
exactly. Yeah,
never
and
slept at the office.
those kind of all night working. I don't even know if they're even a thing anymore. They probably are. It wasn't the norm. I mean, maybe once every 6 weeks or once every 2 months or something
Yeah.
like that. It wasn't the norm. But anyway, I think we're in a whole. We're wading into a whole new issue here about sleeping in the office and working 24 hours a day. And I know that Elon Musk is a big fan of
Uh,
turning offices into bedrooms and all that kind of stuff. On that note, Rhona, thank you so much for all the stuff that you brought to the show this week. A pleasure as absolutely ever. That is us done for this week's show. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Lots of great stuff coming up on Purple Acorn. Every weekday. Every weekday there's stuff. So on Tuesdays, tomorrow, there's the HR Morning Show. Wednesdays, Hire Her, Talent Collective podcast. My First Job with Mike Wood on Thursdays. From the Desk of Jada Montemorano on Fridays. Huge amounts of stuff. All available as podcasts. All available on the Purple Acorn site. And probably the best way to access it is through the Purple Acorn LinkedIn page. So make sure you follow that. If you want to listen to my longer form interviews, please go to Recruiting Future, wherever you get your podcasts, while you're listening to the Alder Hour podcast, obviously. This is Matt Alder. I will be back. We will all be back this time next Monday, if I can remember who I am and what I'm doing. I'm already looking forward to it. This is Matt Alder, clocking out.